Welcome to the Nick Blevins Family Ministry Podcast. Our goal is to help you maximize your church's potential. You'll hear from top leaders in children's, student, and family ministry about the principles and practices they use. Now here's your host, Nick Blevins.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to episode 224 of the podcast. In this episode, we have Amber Baker back on, and we talk all about kids ministry in a pandemic and family ministry models, how she made the transition to a family ministry team at their church, some of the bumps along the way, where they got to now, where it's starting to feel more unified, more like the culture they want. And we talked about launching kids ministry in the midst of COVID. Now, we recorded this in the fall, actually, later in the fall, but it's still true now. So a lot of the things you're going to hear, and many churches are just now in recent months resuming in-person services. So if that's you, especially if you have kids ministry, you're going to love listening to this episode and hearing her talk about all of that. Now, before we jump in, we're about to launch the next round of Volunteer Boost with Ministry Boost. Volunteer Boost is a 28-day challenge to recruit more volunteers. If you sign up, it's $37 for your whole church staff, so you could actually get multiple staff people involved from different ministries. And it's really like one of these challenges where you're going to get something every week, really every day you get an email, but we focus on 4 days a week. You're working on it, Monday through Thursday, building a system to recruit more volunteers. And at the same time, you're working on the onboarding part and how you're going to keep more of them once they say, yeah, I'm interested. And then how do you get them into the process so that they get orientation, training, everything they need to get onboarded and stick as a volunteer. Now, we did this for the very first time in January, and there were a number of leaders that did it. I think there's over 35, 40, something like that. Volunteers have been recruited from those leaders that took the challenge in January, and that's still growing because even though it's a month-long challenge, you see the fruit of it long after that, right? Because you do these recruiting efforts, but it takes a little while to get people in the pipeline, recruited, trained, the whole deal. So they're still placing new volunteers from that last run in January, but we're launching it again. It will start April 12th, but you don't want to wait till then to sign up. In fact, you can't. You got to sign up by April 11th. And then we'll kick it off then. There's weekly live Zoom calls to help you as you're implementing the process. But the whole thing is built around helping you recruit more volunteers, which most leaders I talk to, that's always been something that's needed. It's always been a challenge, but pandemic in some ways has made it even harder because some folks aren't ready to return to in-person church yet. And so your recruiting pool looks a little bit different. And we talk about that as well. So check out ministryboost.org if you want to sign up to recruit more volunteers in your church and be part of the Volunteer Boost Challenge. You can get the show notes and everything from this episode at nickblevins.com/episode 224. But let's go ahead now and listen to Amber Baker talk about her experience launching children's ministry in the midst of COVID-19, in-person services, all that, as well as the transition to her family ministry model as a staff and some of the ways they've changed it and tweaked it to get to where they are now, which is a system that works. Well, today we have Amber Baker back on the podcast. Welcome back, Amber.
Hey, thanks for having me.
You bet. For anybody who didn't listen to the first episode you were on, which they should go listen to that, or if they forget, give us like an introduction, maybe like an update. How are things going now? I can't even remember how many episodes ago, how many years ago probably it was since you were last on. So I'm sure things have changed.
Yes. Hey, so my name is Amber Baker. I am the family pastor at Grace Church of Glendora in Southern California. And I've been on staff for 6 years in this role. Gosh, I can't even remember, maybe 3 or 4 now. I'm a mom. I've been married to my husband, Josh, for 20-something years. 24 years. And I have a 21-year-old. I have a 16-year-old and 2 14-year-olds. So my world is crazy right now. Well, always has. Love it that way. But yeah, that's just a snippet of who I am.
And tell us again a little bit about your church. And we're going to talk about what it's been like now the last however many months through COVID-19 and all the changes related to kids and student ministry, but just a quick overview of the church.
Yeah, pre-COVID, I would say that we are about 1,200, 1,400 people. We had a more traditional service, a contemporary service. We have a Spanish congregation as part of Grace Church. I oversee a staff birth through 18, so that it includes a Wednesday night live coordinator, a Sunday morning childcare or a Sunday morning nursery and childcare coordinator, a kids pastor, a junior high pastor, and a high school pastor. So we have a really great family life team is what we call it. And that has just been, over the last 6 months, a blessing in the midst of all of this craziness. So that's a little bit of context of where we are. Southern California, we are about an hour from LA, kind of nestled in the foothills. And so a kind of small town feel for Southern California culture.
All right. And then we were going to talk about your family life team and the restructure when you moved into that new role and some of that, but we'll save that for the second part of the conversation.
Awesome.
I want to start with, what has the journey been like for your church from back when, COVID-19 shut down in-person services and you moved online for kids and student ministry all the way till now? So what did it look like when you went online, and what did you do in both kids ministry and student ministry, and how did it go?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. So talk about topsy-turvy. Talk about changing your world. I've been in ministry for over 20 years and never experienced anything like this before. Oftentimes when parents would get upset, I would just say, I'm so sorry. I've never pastored through a pandemic before. But we went online. It took us, for kids ministry, probably 2 or 3 weeks to catch our bearings. And thanks to, we use Orange curriculum. So thank you to Orange and how fast they pivoted with their curriculum, putting everything together. I'm not a techie person, so the ability to put our media package together in a way that sends it online was difficult for us. So I was so thankful that they so quickly adjusted and helped us with that. So we went online for services and emailing it to parents. And then we did small group via Zoom with kinder through elementary kids. So that's what we did with them. And we found as just a fascinating experience of people that were super consistent every Sunday morning showing up to our building were not consistent doing kids church with their kids. But families that were not consistent on Sunday morning would show up once a month, once every couple months, were the most consistent online. So it was just a fascinating turn of events. It's just not what I expected.
Yeah, that's interesting. Was that from conversations or, I don't know, surveys? What led you to see that trend there?
A lot of it was social media, and then analytics of our videos. And then in just talking with parents too, and parents fessing up to me saying, yeah, we came every Sunday morning, but I just can't figure out how to, sit through an hour of an adult service and then an hour of preschool and then an hour of elementary. And so we just don't. And it was just really fascinating to understand the reason behind that.
Yeah, it makes me wonder, the people that were less consistent in person but were better online, is that because they're used to being less consistent in person and they were trying to do something? I don't know. It's curious.
Yeah.
Did you ask that question? Did anybody tell you?
A couple families said part of their struggle was their schedule on Sundays. And so now the convenience of being able just to watch online, they really liked it. So I was like, well, good for you. I'm proud of you.
Yeah, that's awesome. I guess I can think of some people I know that are like that. They always been committed. And the truth is they would be regular on Sunday mornings if it weren't for other commitments. I'm thinking sports with a few families.
Right.
And so it doesn't surprise me, though, that they're consistent online, because it always mattered to them. It was never, they're obviously doing the sports thing, but it's not because they didn't care about church. How about the Zoom groups with kids? How did that go? Did you keep it going too?
We did. We took a couple week break in August, and then we are starting back up this week as a fall launch. But small group Zoom with kids, you just have to be flexible. And our children's minister just has done a fabulous job with it, of allowing kids to, be kids and be silly. And the whole point was not to actually deliver content, but just to see faces and stay relationally connected as best we could. So she had not super high expectations of content, but it was just fun to laugh and see their homes and, just get to see their faces. So that went really well. And we are doing, in the fall, we're doing 3 nights a week or 3 nights a month, small group. And then we are doing 1 in person we're gonna venture out and try to do small groups in person once a month.
Okay. Will you do it like coordinated, like all the groups meet the same night at the church or something like that? Or is it whenever
Yeah.
they? Okay.
Yeah, we're going to do it. And we're doing it really small because we're not sure how many families are actually going to show. So we're going to just do it kind of simply, like the first Wednesday night of the month, everybody comes, and it'll probably be a pretty large small group. But we just want to see who's going to come first, and then we'll adjust from there.
Yeah, that makes sense. How about student ministry online back then? And like, how did it go? Because I know for us, we went online with student groups and Zoom and all that. And it actually was pretty good for a while. It wasn't until May, like getting around that Memorial Day, when our normal ministry would have stopped anyway after Memorial Day, that it dipped. But I do know from talking to a lot of leaders that it was never great. Some was 30% out the gate. What was that like for you? And how did that keep going, up into summer?
Yeah, so our junior high, I think it was just the mix of our students and their desire to like see, and they were just missing community so bad. Our junior high Wednesday night Zoom meetings were phenomenal. Before my boys transitioned to high school, they were in 8th grade, they were a part of it. And they would literally sit on Zoom for 2.5 hours having Zoom youth group. And it was fun and they loved it. Once we did promotion, kind of once school started back up, June, July, that became more difficult. Some kids transitioned into high school and it just didn't have the same flair. So personalities really made a difference with that format. So they did really well. They have just started moving on campus. Wednesday nights, we're at about half, 50% participation rate on campus. We've done it now 2 weeks, but there's just something about community that our students are desperate for. So, so that's junior high. High school was so hard. We have an interesting group of high schoolers that are trying to figure out. We had a group of seniors move on, and I loved each one of them, but it was time for them to move on. And that just shifted the dynamics in our group. So Zoom youth group for high school was so difficult. The youth pastor would have, a whole meeting and nobody would turn on their camera, or they would just be rude. I mean, that's really what it was. So our high school pastor, Kim, decided, you know what, forget this, and started doing in July youth group in person. And, we have to do masks and socially distant. But she's like, I don't care. I'll figure it out. I just want them in person. And that has been so good. And especially with the incoming freshmen, that's been really helpful for them. So Zoom was not our thing for high school at all.
Did the in-person high school, has the attendance been good?
Oh, yeah, it's been great. We're probably close to pre-COVID numbers for us. So we had a really strong 8th grade group. So when they came up into the freshmen in the high school, it really brought some great energy. And yeah, we're real close to pre-COVID numbers for high school.
I'm hearing that a lot, especially in like where you are in California. California is a little bit different, right? It's such a big state and it can be very different, depending on where you are in California. But in the South, the Southwest, our friend Kenny Conley, they've been having in-person student gatherings. I think they're higher than their pre-COVID attendance in high school right now. And so I've heard that a lot around the country about student ministry in particular, even in churches where they're gathering in person and the main service gathering in person, whether outdoors or indoors, is 30%. And student ministry is 85, 90, 95%. You know what I mean? And it kind of makes sense. The craving for community, they're smaller at the ability to be able to get them together, keep it safe. A lot of student ministries are groups based, right? So you're basically just getting a bunch of groups together. So that's cool. That's really good. How about, I know that you're gathering kids ministry outside for the first time this Sunday. Like, what are the plans? What are you thinking? What's it going to look like?
Man, we're going old school. We're going simple and old school, which has been so interesting through this COVID of going really back to the basics in so many ways, phone calls and handwritten cards and some of those things that when you're so busy programming, you can easily miss. And so we are going back to the basics for Sunday. We're going to, we'll be outside in what we call our pavilion. It's a little outdoor covered area. And there, our kids minister is going to do the Bible story without a TV, and and we're gonna, old school, write out name tags, and we're gonna play a game and on our field, and we're just to be together. So we're really we don't have high expectations. We're hoping that 5 or 6 kids will come when we would have hundreds before. We just want to start something. We're finding with our outdoor adult service that the families with children don't want to come because they have to make their kids sit still and be quiet. And let's be honest, parent shaming is a real thing sometimes in the church. And when our kids are loud and crazy in the midst of a service. So I'm excited to see who will show up and if this will open the doors for families to be able to worship together on campus.
With your outdoor services, like, what has that been like? How many, families with young kids are coming? Is it, a pretty small percentage? And even overall, like, what kind of percentage have you been getting for those gatherings?
Let's see. I'm not real great at percentages, but I would say we are 10, 15% on adults. Like, we're really low, 100, 120.
Yeah.
So we're really low in the adults. And part of it is we are in Southern California and we are in LA County. So that lends a whole nother set of rules. So, yes, we're socially distanced. Yes, we have to wear masks, but even when we sit down at our seats, we're not supposed to take off our masks. So to sit outside, like one Sunday, we were having this heat wave. It was 110 at 9 o'clock in the morning, and you have to sit outside with a mask on, and that's just hard. And so, so we probably have only had maybe 3 families with kids come, and I'm impressed. I'm really impressed. But yeah, we have not had many. So I'm hoping more will come now that we have a space for kids to worship. And we're going to do it old school, like, sit and worship with your parents. And then after worship's over, we're going to, move over into our kids portion, which reminds me of, when I was little. And we'll see how that works.
Sure. Yeah. Has anything changed online with your kids and student ministry and your approach and what you've done with that in this time from when you first started it till now?
Ooh, that's a good question.
Because I know some people did extra things and then took it away when they started gathering in person, or, and in our case, we put our content on our website for kids ministry, and it was just, it was embedded in the page there, and you could play the videos there. And we moved that to YouTube in the summer. We felt like that was going to be more accessible. And I think it was. I think that was a big move for us. But it's that kind of thing where, like, some churches, that started doing something online and then pulled back, changed, tweaked, because it felt like we were all experimenting. Like, who knew what was working or what wasn't? But maybe not. Maybe in your case, you put that content up there. You've done the groups. Sounds like you've continued that. So you've kind of run that same strategy for a while, which I guess that means, it's been good enough that you've kept it the same.
Yeah, I think we were trying to, well, this whole process of the last 6 months or 7 months has just been an interesting one, because just when you think you have maybe something slightly figured out, it changes again. So just the decision fatigue has just been overwhelming. And so once we kind of got into a rhythm, I think our team was just like, we're not going to change it because it is working. And we have decided to use our creative energy for things like summer kickoff, fall kickoff, figuring out some creative ways to love on parents. So rather than putting all of our time and energy and creativity into like the Sunday morning delivery, we have instead done outside events in a different way.
Yeah, and I know a number of churches that have said, we're going to focus a little bit more on the relational. And, we'll do the digital. We got it there. Like, it's there. It's good. You can totally watch it, but then spend more of that time relationally. We had Andrea Gossley on the podcast. She talked about that too, and how they were focusing there. Anything else you'd want to add or tell us about, in the midst of COVID-19 and kids and student ministry? Because I do want to shift gears and talk about, your team structure and the role and how that changed a few years ago.
Yeah. I think, as a parent of teenagers myself, I'm really thankful for youth pastors who are relational. I think this season has for sure reminded me that how much it is my responsibility to raise my children spiritually. But I need another voice in the life of my teenagers. And I'm thankful for youth pastors and small group leaders who are willing to drop off a pizza on the porch or, drop off goodies or pick up a kid for ice cream or, goodness, that has meant so much to me. So I think that's, as a parent, I'm just so thankful for relationships that my kids have in their pastors.
Yeah, I mean, relational student ministry and maybe small groups based student ministry where that's a priority. In some ways that has really shined, right? And if a ministry hasn't had that, whether kids or student ministry or adults, it's probably been exposed in this season, right? Because you haven't been able to rely on the other things like the in-person gatherings and large groups and stuff like that. So, yeah, we had this podcast. I don't know if it's going to be before, it's going to air before or after this one, but Mike Clear from Orange, I talked with him, and he just talked personally about his own experience with his kids, having one that's a student, one that's a kid at their church, and just the different, experiences they're having, and at a church that values small groups all the way through. But obviously, kids ministry small groups very different from student ministry small groups in most churches. And during the season, his son that's in middle school has had a great experience, and not exactly the same, with his daughter in elementary school. And I get it; it's hard because even our church has done small groups since we started the church for kids, and we've got, there's awesome leaders who go above and beyond and kind of create that experience, and we do so much to empower them and create that kind of group feel and culture. But it's just different when kids are younger like that, and outside the group, church gatherings is not as common, and connections, and they're not on social media. They don't have phones, at least most of them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's just different. But I'm thankful too for relational ministry and leaders, and our student pastor has been able to ramp that up even personally. Over the last number of months, he's done a great job leaning in there because that's what he could do. And so that's been a good thing. Well, I did want to talk about, this is something I've always wanted to have you on the podcast to talk about, which is kind of the transition your church made, that a lot of churches make, to go from kids ministry, student ministry, to kind of one family life, next gen, whatever you want to call it, thing together, and then have one leader of it, which is you. And that transition for you, for you all wasn't without some bumps, from our conversations that we had before. Yes. But I'm a big fan of the model. So I'd love for you to walk us through what that transition looked like, some of the bumps, and then we could talk about how it's been going since then.
Okay, great. Yeah. So I was hired at Grace Church as the second children's pastor. They had one so amazing. I love Zach Grelling. He's fabulous. And they just needed a partner. So it's almost like this co-space, which was unique in and of itself, but our personalities worked really well together. So it worked great. And then a couple years in, our senior pastor was going to go on sabbatical. And so they used this opportunity as kind of a trial to say, hey, Amber, why don't you lead this team of kids and youth, junior high and high school, and let's see how this goes. That way it took a little bit of extra pressure off of the executive pastor when, all that he picked up as our senior pastor was on sabbatical. So it started out as kind of a trial and never stopped. It's like, here you go. This is now your official role. And, there are some unspoken things within ministry context that they won't come out and tell you in seminary or ministry school. Often a lot of churches don't talk about it either, but there is this unwritten ranking within ministry sects. I think that a lot of people feel, and that it's the high school pastor is like the most important, and then it's junior high, and then it's kids ministry. And so it is this underlying thing. Now, that's not true across the board, but I've been in ministry for 20 years, and every church I've ever been at, there's always this sense that it's the high school pastor's the cool one, right? And so when I was asked to take this position, that meant that me being kids pastor, bottom of the totem pole, quote unquote, is now overseeing the high school pastor and junior high pastor. It really was an interesting dynamic shift. I'm very much a collaborative leader, and so I'm not like going to tell you how to do your job, but we're going to work together to make some changes and improve. And there was a lot of tension in that. This sense that I didn't trust them because I was asking to see their emails or their weekly emails that went out, or talk through things or show up at events. Like I got so much pushback from the high school pastor for just showing up at an event. So it was very hard. But I wanted to lead with grace, and I wanted to do the best I could. And so, yeah, I don't know. It was a very rocky transition. Let's also be honest that I'm also a woman. And while some gentlemen say they have no problem with women in ministry, they might theologically believe that, but how they actually act that out is different too. So I think that in terms of one of my staff members, that was part of it also. Didn't matter that I had been in ministry 20 years, didn't matter that I had a master's degree, didn't matter that I speak all over the United States and train other teams. It was that he should have gotten it, and that was in his mind. And so I think that was part of the struggle.
Yeah, and it didn't matter, too, that if I remember our conversation correctly, you had 20 plus years of experience. He had, I don't know, 8 or 7 or 5 or something like that.
Oh, it was like 4. It was 4.
Yeah, and there's so many things going on here, right? Because there's, I've seen this play out in churches where male, female wasn't even a factor because it was all guys, right? So, and what happened was the next gen pastor, family pastor, whatever comes in, and there's a student pastor that's already there, or especially like in your case where one person, both of them are already there and one is hired up, changes roles. So now you're reporting to kind of a coworker. That's its own tough dynamic. Then you add in a dynamic where a leader, and this could have been your high school pastor, may not have been, but it was in this other case I'm thinking of, where they just want they want to grow as leaders. They want that opportunity. And even though, like, if you rationally had them talk about it, well, yeah, I guess it does make sense for the 20-year veteran with all that experience to get that before me with my 4 years. I don't know that everybody thinks through that. You're kind of selfish and they're thinking about it themselves. I'm sure there's a true arrogance in there too somewhere where it's like, I could probably do it better. And then you add in the male-female thing, which I was going to say certainly is a thing. It's one thing to say, oh yeah, I think women in leadership is great. And I think in our last podcast interview, we talked about how, if I remember correctly, you're the first female pastor at your church.
Yeah.
So, that was a hurdle. And those, I don't know, the ripples, from those kind of beliefs or practices for decades still hang around. So
yes, they do.
there's just a lot in there. And so it does make it messy, and I see that a lot in churches. So you had to deal with that, and what was that like? And then take us forward after that change to some of the changes that have happened and where it started to settle. And then I'd love to hear about, what it's like now.
Yeah, so we tried really hard to make it work, and that we had moments where it was really great. Because I moved partly out of the Kidmin role, we had to have part of my job description is written, then I still have a little bit in kids ministry, which then makes it difficult too. Like, where do you divide your time and how does that all work? But we made it work. It just got to a point though that we were just not progressing as a team. There was just a constant tension. And so some decisions had to be made. And one of my staff members decided that he was going to resign. And it was a mutual decision, and which was good. And once the team dynamic shifted, personality team dynamic shifted, then there became more a sense of cohesion and working together. I'm being really careful of
Sure. Yeah.
what I say, but just knowing that having the right team members, the right personalities, the right mindset, gosh, makes all the difference in how far and how wide you can do ministry. So with that staff member no longer on staff with me, then we searched for a new pastor. And that in itself was a very difficult process. I learned from so many people at the Orange Conference and next on hiring and process. And so that, I was so thankful for all the people that have done this multiple times, because this was my first, and had 4 great candidates and brought them in for all day interviews, and it got to the end of it and went, oh, none of them are the right fit. Now, mind you, I was, leading the family ministry team and the interim high school pastor at this time because we needed it. And I was running ragged and trying to figure it out. Plus, we're in the process of trying to hire, and to get to that point and realize that all of our 4 months of work has come down to nothing was so hard. But I was committed that we need to find the absolute best person for the season for our church. So my executive pastor and I went back to the drawing board and started again. And that was, oh gosh, so emotional. But we started again. And lo and behold, sitting in our congregation was this fantastic lady who has a master's degree from Fuller in youth ministry, who has a passion for youth ministry, and had talked herself out of applying the first time because she thought, oh, they don't, I'm not what they're looking for. And so when our senior pastor got up and said, hey, we didn't hire this go round, please keep praying for us, her husband nudged her and said, you need to apply. And we're really thankful she did. So it was once she applied, and the second round went much faster. And so in January, we hired a new high school pastor. So that was awesome. In December, this last year, our junior high pastor came to me and said, hey, I'm being asked to come for an interview of a church in upstate New York. And I was like, oh, we had just made a decision for our new cohesive team. And he was going to interview at another church. But, it has been such a blessing for them. It's been a cool thing to watch God's hand in them and his family. And so sure enough, he took a position, left in the beginning of February. And thankfully, the Lord was so gracious to us for our transition with the junior high position. And we were able to find somebody really fast. And it was great because he's young, right? Just finished school at Biola here in Southern California. So it just is so fun to watch the team that I have now, and just how the Lord has provided experience and young and fun and structure. And I just sit back some days and just thank the Lord for his hand, because I could not have put this together myself. And I couldn't have seen this, honestly, a year ago, where we would be now. So I have almost a complete new team, and the dynamics are 100% different.
Yeah, I gotta tell you, it works both ways, right? Like when we made the shift at our church, we still have the same staff, from before we made the shift. And I'm very thankful for that. And all of that is credit to the team, because the humility they have, it was never about them. There wasn't the ego thing, all that. And so that's worked really well. But I can't tell you how many times I hear this kind of story, or it never really works out. Or, it's got to be a hire from the outside, which sometimes that helps, because then you're not dealing with the dynamic of like your peer, coworker, is now your boss kind of thing. But more often than not, it's like the percentage of prospective staff who will be team players and will think family life as a whole and not in a silo is actually much smaller than we think. They just have never done it, even if they're young. They just have never done it, never experienced it.
Yeah.
And so it's, maybe 20%, if that, sometimes fit that dynamic, and that it's already hard to find staff. So then you factor that in, and building it new. And a lot of times with younger leaders who don't have those, preconceived ideas or expectations or history is the way to go.
Yeah. And what we did different that I think has helped is in the job description for the high school and the kids ministry position, we wrote a percentage of their job. I can't remember what it is off the top of my head right now, but a percentage of their job is to actually work on projects for the whole life stages team. So we're not saying, hey, you're part of life stages team, I want you to be collaborative. We're actually saying in your job description, you have to devote a certain amount of hours to projects to kids ministry or to projects for the whole team. And so starting, they already recognize that, hey, this isn't just about junior high or just about high school. This is about the greater team and our families. And I think that little shift really made a difference.
Yeah, especially the clarity of it right on the front end. It's one thing to say, I'm on that team, that's who I report to and whatever, but that actually part of your job every week, and things fluctuate, but a percentage is to work towards this whole, and that's what you want anyway. That's how you get the benefits and strengths of everyone helping the entire family life get better and mitigate some of each other's weaknesses, to an extent too. That's the other part is we can help each other. So that's just a really smart idea. I think that's really good.
Yeah. It's worked out. Thank you, Jesus.
Yeah. Any last thoughts about that transition? And I know it's been, a while since that move was made, but you've been through a number of things. And I feel like that's one of the hidden benefits of this model is consistency. Because on your end, it doesn't necessarily feel consistent because you lost a high school pastor and took forever and got one. Losing a junior high pastor, fill that in. And then that is also something I hear a lot of, especially the larger church kids, the more, staff are transitioning. Mm-hmm. But one of the hidden benefits of the model of family ministry, family life, like one next gen team is the consistency, because if somebody on the team leaves, that director is still there. Even if the director leaves, usually there's somebody still there. And there's always times when, multiple people might transition or leave or whatever, but it's way less, compared to when a student pastor leaves and they're reporting to an executive pastor. Well, that consistency's gone, right? Because that executive pastor probably had no presence in the ministry, versus a next gen or family pastor would. So I think that's a huge benefit of it.
Absolutely. Being even like some of the events we've done, the fall kickoff, or we're getting ready to do fall kickoff this weekend, but summer kickoff and some of our other events that we've tried to figure out via this COVID world, we all show up together and we all serve together. Like, for instance, our high school did a senior dinner. We did it in the back of trucks, kind of tailgate style for graduation in June. And, the kids pastor and the junior high pastor, the child care coordinator all showed up to serve food, to set up, to clean up. And there were 2 or 3 comments from parents that said, I'm so impressed that your whole team is here to serve for an event that's really used to only be high school ministry. And so just even showing up at those events changes the way families look at our ministry as a whole. So it's been really good.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, anything else you'd want to share, or how can people connect with you?
Yeah, they can connect with me on social media, Amber D. Baker. You can find me at Grace Church of Glendora. I'd love to help or just chat, or, Nick's, you've got my number. If you want my number, they can have my number. And, but I'd love to just connect with people and help. And I don't know, sometimes we just need a little encouragement or know we're not alone in our processes.
Yeah, definitely. Well, and I'm curious, I'd love to hear how the outdoor kids ministry thing goes, after the next few weeks or something like that. So I'll have to touch base again. But yeah, thanks for taking the time and for coming back on the podcast.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
Well, it was great to hear from Amber again. If you go back and listen to the previous interview we did, you can hear her talk about this transition to the family ministry model. and some of the bumps they were experiencing then, and then to be fun to come back and listen to this one. If you didn't get to listen to both, obviously I got to talk to her both times. There's a large gap between these conversations, but I remember, and some conversations she and I had offline about how things were going. It's really cool to hear the progress they've made now. And there are 3 action items I think of coming out of that interview, a couple of them related to kids ministry, like she talked about meeting and some of that, and then one related to this family ministry model. But one would be to track trends for online engagement. We talked a lot about that. There's a lot of things you can track, and I don't think we need to track 37 things for online engagement. But what are some trends? I know right now, as we continue to grow our in-person services in terms of the attendance, it's still really low where I am. We had a pretty good week this past week, and it was maybe 36% or something of our pre-COVID attendance. So that'll tell you where that is. But as that has gone up, online has certainly gone down. So I think it's important to watch those trends. And then her idea about planning events, maybe they're small too, again, with COVID and thinking about social distancing and all that, to re-engage families. Maybe it's an outdoor thing. Maybe now you can do some indoor things and people will show up. But what are some ways you can help re-engage families? It might be with smaller events, not necessarily the big things you used to do. And then last, evaluate your family ministry model. Maybe you don't have one. It's very siloed. There's children's ministry and then there's youth ministry and all that. Maybe the idea is, how can we get these to work together better? And you could even write job descriptions to support the family ministry team as well as their own area. So just like she talked about, that way you're not focused only on one thing. You're focused on, how do I help the team all together? And maybe those job descriptions for staff get rewritten so that is a priority. I thought that was a great idea. You can get all our links and notes at nickblevins.com/episode 224. And don't forget, if you want to recruit more volunteers, sign up for Volunteer Boost. The challenge starts April 12th. You want to sign up before then. It's after Easter, so you can get through Easter. I wish we could get you more volunteers before Easter, but you probably should have signed up for the January challenge if that was the case. But you always need volunteers. So you're going to get through Easter, sign up for this. Your whole staff can participate, anybody that leads volunteers. And it's a great way to give you the training, the strategy to recruit. I mean, that's probably the most valuable thing, is we're going to give you a plan for how to recruit volunteers that may be a little different than you've used before. And then the challenge part just gives you a little bit of accountability, because you're checking in every week. We are going to have live Zoom calls you can join to talk about it. And our hope, of course, is just to help you recruit more volunteers during this season so that you can run and lead your ministry better. So go to ministryboost.org to sign up for that by April 11th, and we hope to see you in there. Thanks for listening, and I'll catch you in the next episode of the Family Ministry Podcast.
Thanks for listening to the Nick Blevins Family Ministry Podcast. We hope this helps you maximize your church's potential. We would love to hear stories of how you apply what you've learned. You can do that by leaving a comment on iTunes or in the show notes at nickblevins.com.